Okay, Matthew, that's the last graph that you're going to see on the exam, so I'm sure you're excited about that, and let's move on. Okay, we're going to get into a section now on your exam. If I can get this MemoPad to work. Seems to be frozen up. Let's see if this will get it going. All right, 18C through 28 are solving equations, okay? 18C through 28 are solving equations. We just did 18B. So if you do the math on this, that's 11 equations, okay? Now I might add one more toward the end. We're going to see how class goes. So you know what's going to be tough about this, guys? Matthew, what's going to be tough is I'm going to mix all these together on the test. You have to be able to look at the equations and say to yourself, this is a quadratic, this is a cubic, this is a logarithmic, this is an exponential, this is a linear, this is whatever type of equation we have. You're going to have to be able to do that, okay? So 18C through 28 are going to be solving equations. And with that in mind, here we go. All right, number 18. I'm going to give you one on the test. It's going to say solve by factoring. That means you're going to have to factor it. Do you see what page number it is? Page number 1. So in your notes, now remember that's after January 17th. Don't forget that. After January 17th in your notes, we start using page numbers. So page number 1, after January 17th, Matthew is where you'll find the information. And I'm going to say on the test, on one problem, it'll say solve by factoring, which means you have to use factoring. You have no choice. You have to use factoring. Okay, so as soon as I realize I'm going to solve by factoring, the first thing I want to do is get one side equal to 0. So I'm going to bring this x squared over, and I'm going to make it a negative x squared. I'm going to bring this negative 3 over, and I'm going to make it a positive 3. Now when I do that, here's what I'm left with. I'm left with x squared. Notice I'm writing it in standard form as I do this. Minus 6x plus 8 equals 0. Now, Chase, Michael, Matthew, if you're sitting there not seeing where the x squared or the negative 6x or the 8 came from, you need to ask questions. Matthew, for you, I'll just say this. I brought the x squared over and made it negative. We combine these two terms right here. 2x squared, negative x squared. See this positive 3 right here, Matthew? We combine the 5 and the positive 3. That's where I got an 8 from. And then I wrote everything in standard form. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and erase this. Michael, Chase, how we doing? Okay? All right. Very good. So we're going to go ahead then, and now we're going to factor this equation. Now notice we already did a bunch of work on factoring earlier on the review, but we do have a lead coefficient of 1, so it's the easy kind. So you say to yourself, what two numbers when multiplied together give you 8, when added together give you negative 6? Well, if I take a negative 4 and a negative 2 and I multiply them together, I get a positive 8. And if I combine them, I get a negative 6. So the factorization would be x minus 4, x minus 2 equals 0. And now we're not just factoring, we're solving by using factoring method. So now you take each group and set each group equal to 0. So x minus 4 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. And then, of course, if you add 4 to both sides, x would equal 4. And you add 2 to both sides, x would equal 2. There we go. That's solving an equation by using the factoring method. Another equation that will be on your test is one like this. Now, this is page 2. Remember, that's after January 17th. So you turn in your notes and you go after January 17th and look for page 2. Now, I want to show something to you guys. Mr. Erhart, you're not giving us a method. What do? Look, guys, anytime you have a square or a cube, you're going to want to get one side equal to 0. That's the first thing you want to do. Anytime you have a power of 2 or 3 with your variables, you're going to want to get one side equal to 0. So I'm going to bring the 3x squared over and make it a negative 3x squared, and that would give me 2x squared. I'm going to bring the 16 over and make it positive. That would give me 38. Is there anyone who doesn't see where the 2x squared came from or the 38? Sure. I'm going to ramble Matthew while these guys are finishing. Would you notice, guys, as you're kind of finalizing what you're doing there, Michael and Chase, look, notice we have an x squared. I don't see an x term anywhere. I only see an x squared term. Do you see that? Look at the problem we just did. We had an x term right here. That's why we had to use either the factoring method or the quadratic formula. Here, just get x squared by itself and take the square root of both sides. We've learned how to do this. So, subtract 38 from both sides. Then divide both sides by 2. And then take the square root of both sides. And we're not finished yet, but we're real close. Does everybody see where I got x squared equals negative 19? All right. So we take the square root of both sides, and this is where it gets really interesting. I chose this problem on purpose to make you use imaginary numbers. So I take the square root of x squared and the square root of negative 19. Now, obviously we know by now the square root of x squared is x, but the square root of negative 19, we can't take the square root of a negative number. So remember, you make the 19 positive, and you put what letter on the outside? I. Do you remember that? I hope you do. And now, you can leave your answer like that, or I guess you could type it in your calculator. You would get 4 point something I. I don't know, 4.3 something or 4.4 I. Either way is fine. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? What did I forget to put in front of this radical right here? Plus minus. Michael, don't forget your plus minus. So there's your answer. Okay? So anytime you just have an x squared or an x cubed or an x to the fourth, get that variable all by itself and then take the square root of both sides, or the cubed root of both sides, or the fourth root of both sides, depending on what type of variable or exponent that you have. Yes, Chase, go ahead. Okay, because first of all, I'm going to tell you a couple things. First of all, Matthew, what he asked is why do we put the plus minus? First of all, anytime your power here is even, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and you take the root of both sides, you got to put plus minus. Now here's why. Let me show you why. Let me put a new screen up here real quick. If I had the square root of 16, you know the answer to that is 4. And why is it 4? Because 4 times 4 is what? 16. But hold it. You might not have thought of this, but another answer to the square root of 16 would be negative 4. Really? Yeah. What's negative 4 times negative 4? Positive 16. So that's why we put plus minus, okay? But that only works with even roots, 2, 4, 6. Okay. All right, moving on. There will be, oh, this is the killer. Complete the square. Yeah, this is the one that makes grown men cry. So here we go. Page number 8. Page number 8. Matthew, there will be a problem on your test that says solve this equation by completing the square. Completing the square. CTS. Page number 8. Page number 8. So I'm going to go through these steps. You're welcome to turn there. You don't have to. I'm going to go through the steps very carefully and very slowly. Whenever you're solving the equation by completing the square, I know you're used to always getting one side equal to 0, but when you're completing the square, you want to move the constant term to the right side. So we're going to move the 5 over and make it a negative 5. That's the first thing you do, okay? Now remember, I'm not going slow enough for you guys to write the steps down. That's why I gave you page number 8, okay? So step 2 says whatever is in front of your x squared, you divide everything by that number. So we're going to divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. Now I chose to use 2 because 2 is the coefficient of your x squared. These cancel, and you're left with x squared minus 4x equals negative 2.5. Now where did I get 2.5? Well, 5 divided by 2. 5 divided by 2. Okay, here's what we do next. Guys, it's going to take like 3 or 4 pages. Okay, it's really long. in your notes, if you turn to page 8, you would see next it says to take your x coefficient, which is 4, and whatever this number is, you always divide it by 2 and then square it. So if I take 4 and I divide it by 2, I get out 2, and then if I square 2, I get out 4. Now, it's a coincidence that you started with 4 and you ended with 4. That won't always happen, okay? But whatever this number is right here, you always divide it by what number? 2, and you always square it. So when I took this number and I divided it by 2 and I squared it, what number did I get out? A 4. You add that to both sides. Yes, we did. Unfortunately, we did. So we add that to both sides. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut and paste this. Oh yeah, definitely. I'm going to go ahead and just, not cut, I'm going to copy it. And then, so we're ready to move on. Right, whatever you get out over here when you divide it by 2 and when you squared it, whatever number you get out, you add that to both sides. All right? All right, so here we go. So here's where we're at. Now, here's what you do next, and you'll find all these steps on page 8. Next, you want to factor this side over here. Now, I did teach you a shortcut, and I want you to pay attention to the shortcut because the shortcuts are very helpful. First of all, can I go ahead and do this? You have 1.5. Everybody should see where that came from, okay? Negative 2.5 plus 4 is 1.5. If you don't know that, use your calculator. We're moving on. Now, here's what I taught you guys. This shortcut only works when you're completing the square. Don't try to do this shortcut when you're not completing the square, okay? So here we go. See this x squared right here? In your head, you take the square root of x squared, which is x, and you put it here and here. See this 4 way over here, not the negative 4, this 4 right here. This 4, whatever that number is right there, you take the square root of it, and you put it there, and you put it there. So whatever this number here is, you take the square root of it. Okay? And then whatever your middle sign is, in this case it's a negative. So because you have a negative here, you put a negative and you put a negative. Now if this would have been a positive 4x, then you would put a positive and a positive. But it's not a positive 4x, it's a negative 4x. So we put a negative and a negative. Okay? The next step, you'll always have matching parentheses, so you write it like this. X minus 2, x minus 2. Now, the reason we do that is we have a whole group to the second power. Do you see that? We have a whole group to the second power. So you are more than welcome to take the square root of that whole group as long as you do it to the other side. So we take the square root of one side and we take the square root of the other side. Now, we have practiced these before. Whenever you take the square root of something squared, let me say that again. Whenever you take the square root of something squared, you're left over with just the base, which is x minus 2, equals plus minus square root of 1.5. And that's actually why you took the square root of that left side, so that you're left with just x minus 2. Chase, all caught up? Mike? Yes, no? Okay. So here's where we're at. Now you should know by now what to do. Can someone tell me in the class what to do to finish this? It's pretty obvious. We're solving for x. There's only really one thing left to do. Come on, we want to get x by itself. Okay, so if I move the 2 over, it's plus minus square root of 1.5 plus 2. Now, I really do want you to type that into your calculator. You guys have to do it for me, or pass it over to me, Mike, real quick, please. Okay, so Matthew, I know you're listening to this. I'm going to take a positive 1.5 plus 2, and you get out 3.22. And then, guys, I've got to take a negative square root of 1.5 plus 2. And you'll get 0.775. Now, Matthew, you need to practice this and make sure you know how to type this in correctly into your calculator. That's very, very important. Okay, that is completing the square, and hopefully we're doing okay. Let's move on. Now, I am going to give you one on the test in which I say solve by using the quadratic formula. So write that down if you need it, because I'm not going to let you have it during the test. So I put it up here for you to look at. Negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. By the way, you will find the steps for this on page 7. Page 7. Page 7. All right. Negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Page 7. After January 17th, you go to page 7. Now, you never want to use the quadratic formula, guys, unless one side's equal to 0. And it is, so we're okay. But if not, make sure you move everything over. Your x squared term always has an a coefficient. Your x term always has your b, has a b coefficient, and your constant term is your c. So a equals 2, b equals negative 8, and c equals 5. So negative b, well, that would be negative 8, negative b, plus minus the square root of b squared. That's 64. Minus 4ac. Well, that would be minus 40. I'm going to stop in a second, okay? All over 2a. 2 times 2 is 4. Now, let's go ahead and do a little simplifying here. What you should have now would be a positive 8 plus minus the square root of 24 all over 4. Does everybody see that okay? Everybody see where the 24 came from? Okay, now watch. Matthew, watch this. I'm going to go to a new page here because I'm running out of room. Now watch what I do. On the test, I do want a decimal answer. Well, we're going to ask, well, no, you mean the 8 and the 4?
8 and 4 and the 24.
We could, but I want your answers to be in decimals. So we're just going to type it in, which is actually easier. Now, see if this makes sense, guys. Watch this. See the plus sign right here? I'm going to write 8 plus square root of 24 all over 4. And then see the minus sign right here? I'm going to write 8 minus square root of 24 all over 4. Does everybody see how I did that? There's a plus minus right here. So I wrote it once with the plus sign and once with the minus sign. And now I'm going to need your help, okay? So I need someone to type in 8 plus the square root of 24. Then be sure and hit enter, Mike, and then divided by 4, enter. And you get 3.22. And if Chase, if you want to practice, that's up to you. Just let us know.
So if I would have changed it to like plus minus square root of 3, I think.
3.
Wrong.
What do you mean? Change.
Like reduce everything by 4, so it'd be.
Oh no. Okay. Here's why you can't do that. Okay. Good question. Matthew, Chase is asking about reducing this fraction here before you break it up into 2 parts. Okay, yes, you can reduce it first, but obviously you have to reduce it correctly or you're going to miss it. So the problem with what you just said is this. This is an outside number. This is an outside number. 24 is an inside number. And what is your outside number right here? So you're trying to reduce 8, 1, and 4, and there's no number that goes into 8, 1, and 4. I would just type it in your calculator. I really would. You're not going to save a whole lot of time reducing first. Actually, you're gonna increase your odds of making a little mistake somewhere. And I'm not saying because it's you. I'm saying anybody in general. Okay. Now, if you type this into your calculator, and Chase, feel free to practice. You should get point. It's actually the exact same problem we did. Did y'all catch that? We're doing the exact same problem that you all just completed the square on. Did you see that? You're doing the exact same problem that you just did complete the square. Only now you're using the quadratic formula. So shouldn't we get out the same two answers if we're doing the same problem? Sure we should. And did we get out the same two answers? Yes, we did. So Matthew, we just completed the square on an equation, and then we did the same equation. We used the quadratic formula. You got the exact same answers out. The exact same thing.